to another episode of Talking Nerdy, the show where we take various story arcs and events from current comics and we cover them. I'm your host, Obi-Wan Jabroni. Now, on today's story, we're going to be covering Spawn's universe. It's a two-issue event that sets up a whole new era for the world of Spawn, and it consists of Spawn's number 318 and the Spawn's Universe one-shot issue. Now, with that, let's start talking nerdy. First up, we have Spawn number 318, written by Todd McFarlane, with arts by Carlos Barberi and colors by J. David Ramos. Omega has been defeated and dragged into his own prison by the plague, but what awaits him at the bottom may be even worse. Spawn and his recent adversary, Medieval Spawn, escape the island together, but how long will this truth last? Now, we open at Spawn's hidden lair, and Spawn and Medieval arrive in from the island. And Medieval asks if this place is safe, and Spawn tells him it depends on why he came to the island and helped him. And they start to argue about whether Medieval is here to help or to sabotage Spawn. And in another room, we see Spawn, and she's studying the readings on the monitor when she hears a bang and runs off yelling for Mark. She runs in to find Spawn and Medieval at each other's throats, and she pulls out her guns and tells Medieval to step away from Spawn now. Spawn says he will explain later and asks where Mark is. And Spawn tells him that he's gone, and she don't know where or how he left the building. And Spawn tells her to watch over Medieval while he goes and finds Mark. Now, he leaves the room, and Medieval tells Spawn that she should trust her instincts and that he means her no harm. She looks hesitant for a minute, but then she tells him not to go anywhere. She will be back, and she leaves to find Mark. And while she's hunting, she finds Spawn in a lower level, saying she told him he wasn't here, and asks if someone could have breached the base and took him. He says no, and seconds later, they hear a crash upstairs. They rush to the source, and they find Mark lying on the floor unconscious. And they wake him up, and he tells them that he's fine, and he don't remember how he got to this room. Last he remembers, he was sitting working on his laptop. And Spawn leaves and goes to check on Medieval. And he enters the room where they left him to find Medieval's armor empty on the ground and says, "Damn it, someone is playing games." And he leaves to go check on his other buddy, Cygor. And last we seen Cygor, he was peacefully resting in his room. Instead, Spawn walks in to find him strung up by chains from the ceiling, and he starts to unhook him. Now, over in a different room, Spawn is still questioning Mark, and she says he was blacked out for over 3 hours, when all of a sudden Spawn bursts into the room, pissed, and asking why Cygor was strung up, and why Medieval is gone, leaving just his armor. And at this point, he gives a little bit of a speech I'm going to read for you. Don't you get it? Do you? They want us to slow down, to take a breath, so they can keep advancing their agenda and their forces while we sit on our hands. The other side will do anything, and I mean anything, to assure their victory. And you two should already know that. They killed Mark's girlfriend, they killed Wanda, and they fucking killed Nyx. They don't give a shit. They'll kill everyone they care about, if they have to. Then they'll disguise themselves as children or old ladies, anything that'll gain your sympathy. Then they'll kill you the second you let your guard down. So you want to take a breather? Then do it away from me, because I'm not going to die because of your stupidity. If we hesitate, if we judge them by their looks, they win. Game over. And Spawn asks, what are they supposed to do? Don't trust your eyes, because you may have to shoot a 5-year-old through the skull someday. And the moment when you think they don't deserve that fate, or their human form pleads with you to spare them, that's the moment you put 2 bullets in their head. Assume anyone you talk to is one of them. Trust no one. Including you? Yes, if it comes to that. What about family, Al? They'll butcher them the second they find you have any, and then they'll hunt down your friends and do the same. Bare your head if you want. If you won't stop this, there's dozens of factions, Mark. They'll fight us and each other. And at this point, she Spawn says she's heard enough and she leaves. And Spawn and Mark go over to the computer and Mark tells them that a bunch of new Hellspawn signals have popped up and the island seems to be the conduit for it. Spawn leaves saying he needs to look into some of his own suspicions. And at that point, we get a really good ending monologue I'm also going to read for you. The whole world isn't being attacked. Only places known to Spawn as enemy strongholds. He's invading their territory hideouts like this for a mutated van of vampires, a militia group known for its brutal and covert invasions upon any faction, standing in the way of their master's goal. Factions these shadowy terrorists call H3. Enemies, heaven, hell, and humans. Their current leader is one called Blood, and what he seeks is exactly the same thing the others crave: power, enough to dominate over enemies. One of your enemies. The problem is that the source of that power resides in hell, and in the form of an empty throne, long since left empty by the slaying of their past master Malbolgia. For whomsoever sits upon that throne controls all that born or ordained to hell. That's enough hellish forces to bring both heaven and earth to its knees. So a massive scum has begun to play out on the earth as all the shadow players attempt to find any crack in the now locked dead zones scattered across the globe. The person they blame for locking them all on Earth with no way for any of the factions to leave is Spawn. How can they grab the empty throne if none of them can get to hell? There's only one answer. Find Spawn. He's the one who holds the key. Everyone trapped here is in a race to find Spawn, then torture him until he tells them how to deactivate one of the dead zones. What all of them are soon to find out is that Spawn is searching for answers too, and he'll circle the globe 10 times over to find a way to stop all the insanity he's unleashed. Because he knows if any of them find a flaw in his barricades, that person will not only be able to harness the power and energy of hell, but they'll also become its new king. Spawn will die before letting that happen. So his quest begins by going to as many dark corners of the world as he needs to get his answers. And that ends this issue. Taking us to our final issue, Spawn Universe One Shot. Written by Todd McFarlane, art by Jim Chung, and colors by FCO Placinia. 318 issues have led to this, the founding of Spawn's universe, a universe of possibilities for Spawn and his allies, as well as his enemies. And we open up 2 weeks ago on a pier, and we see Cog standing at the end, and he's approached by Jericho and 3 others. And they ask why he ran from them, and he has no place to hide. Cog says he wasn't running, he was waiting. Jericho tells him his actions have become problematic and tells him to step away from his cat. Cog's cat attacks and is easily killed, and Jericho goes over and rips a small green vial from his corpse. And he says, "We know you think you have all the answers, that there's no one as smart as you, and you survived all these centuries. Perhaps there's a shred of truth to that, but there's a new breed of us. You've seen what we're doing globally, and when our Lord Omega tells us to begin the cleansing, We understand that only means one thing. Those from the old guard must be eliminated. Sad to say, you're part of that group, and your irrelevancy has been showing itself more and more each day. All those Hellspawn always trying to steal their powers, but you couldn't take it from not from a single one of them, especially Gunslinger. Heard you nearly lost your head last time you met. That must hurt. And we wondered, what's keeping you alive? How do you do it? Then it dawned on us. It had to be the cat, or at least what you hid inside your cat, the last remnants of your medicine. And he knocks Cog out instantly and says there's a plane ready to take him to the island. Go now. Omega said Cog has the answers he needs. Now, at that point, we switch to the current time, and we see Spawn fighting a group of demon-possessed humans on a rooftop. And he kills all but 3 of them that he chains up and hangs from the roof's edge. And he asks why they were attacking the woman. And they say she's a nobody. They just wanted her papers. Spawn says he believes them, and then drops them off the roof to their death anyway. And he approaches the woman, tells her that she needs to leave town right now, tonight. And at that point, we switch to Spawn's lair. Mark tells Spawn that someone is working very hard to hide themselves and that he don't think that Omega is dead. And Spawn says he needs to go back to the island, and he grabs Cygor and he leaves. And we switch to Omega's island. Spawn and Cygor are assaulting the military base, and as the battle rages on, someone walks from the shadows and says, "Cease fire." And we see a fully armored man approach, and he raises his hands, and they glow. They glow blue, sorry. And Spawn and Cygor are frozen in place. And he says that he owns this island and controls all its power. And he goes on to say, "You didn't know at the time, Spawn, but you did me a great service when you eliminated Omega. Originally, I'd come here hoping to join his side as he began to formulate his takeover of the Earth. I thought that I thought that was just his first step before he turned his attention towards the bigger prize, Hell's empty throne. Because whoever sits in that seat becomes a king, the ruler of Hell, with an army big enough to bring down both heaven and earth. But he didn't seem to be aware of that opportunity. Maybe he was still getting used to being on this planet. Now we'll never know what he would have done, thanks to you, Spawn. Now, it's my turn to lead the way, but I can't do that unless you unlock the dead zones again. Perhaps you need the right coaxing. My new subject will demonstrate." And he reaches out and he touches Cygor and unfreezes, and starts to attack Spawn, breaking his back. Spawn is knocked out and Cygor carries him off with his new master. And they approach another base, and they are met by Jericho. Jericho says his clan will join him, and he thinks that the vampires, angels, and warrior clans will as well. We learn they have 2 other prisoners also, Cog and Gunslinger Spawn, and they clamp Spawn on a rack next to them. And we learn that this new leader's name is Disruptor. And he shocks Cygor and tells him to come, and they leave the prisoners alone in the room. Spawn looks over and asks asks what Cog was up to, and who this other Spawn was. Cog says he has nothing to do with this, and Gunslinger says he came looking for Cog. Cog tells them he has something to show them both, and Spawn says he don't care what he wants. Cog starts to scream and yell like a madman, and the guards enter saying, "Get him out of here now." They unshackle him, and he quickly steals one of Gunslinger's bullets as he's led out of the room. And they take him and they throw him back into the pit yet again. Now, back in the prison, Gunslinger starts to scream as well, but instead of unshackling him, they electrocute him and leave him hanging. And a guard approaches to make sure that he's still alive. And when he gets close enough, Spawn's suit lashes out, killing him. And his chains lash out, breaking his and Gunslinger's shackles both. And they start to fight their way out of the room. And Spawn says they need to find Cygor. Gunslinger tells them no and shoves them both into the shadows, teleporting them to a coast miles from the island. Now, we switch back to the pit, where we get another internal monologue from Cog. Something hasn't been right since the very creation of mankind. When a supposed perfect creator designed a species filled with so many flaws, not a single day has existed when man has lived in harmony with each other. Not one day. In those flaws, the human race, that servants, the warriors from heaven and hell, have exploited ever since. One of those servants, who was present at the dawn of it all, with a direct hand in creating the original symbiote, has preyed upon the weakest of us through his main objectives was exploit the Hellspawns. But his loyalty was never enough. Nothing he did satisfied his master. But he doesn't have a master anymore. He died long ago. So now, with the help of a stolen bullet, a shard of stone from a cold wall, he has the final two puzzles pieces needed to complete it. He had come to the island. He had become a prisoner so that he could send a signal to the darkness, asking the darkness to bring him power from the future. That victim was Omega Spawn. But for that to happen, the darkness created in the past needed to take form. Thus was born the Plague Spawn. All that was needed now to obtain a tiny piece from the present day Spawn, Gunslinger's bullet, became that piece. Now, we switch to later on in the day, out in the middle of the ocean on a boat, and a whirlpool appears out of nowhere, sucking the freight ship into it. And out of the pool, a man in green armor bursts into the sky. That man is Cog, reborn, and now he goes by the name Sin. And at this point, we switch to an ancient battlefield, and we get 3 parts for each of the other 3 spawns, and they have a little story to tell. This one is Medieval's. Now, on this ancient battlefield, we see Medieval walking through a field of corpses, and he approaches a giant dragon that is rode by a wizard. And we learn that they had slaughtered all these people. The wizard says Medieval will fall in the name of Calistro. And Medieval lunges and decapitates the dragon. The wizard blasts Medieval in the chest, sending him flying back. And at that moment, Mark raises out of bed, wakened from this nightmare, gasping. And he sits up and is just lost and wanders off into the base. Now, we switch yet again to She Spawn's mini-story in Lexington, Kentucky. She Spawn slinks out of the shadows and hides her suit as she approaches her mom on a park bench. And we learn that her mom is raising She Spawn's daughter Annie, and that Annie thinks that She Spawn is her aunt. She Spawn starts to cry and tells her mom to protect Annie, and that she won't ever be back because her life is too dangerous now. She leaves, and when in private, falls to her knees, crying and screaming. Now, we switch to our last mini-story in this issue for Gunslinger Spawn, and we switch to an unknown woods, and we see Gunslinger laying on the ground with arrows in his chest. And we get a time lapse of about a year that he has been laying there. And while we see this, we get a monologue as well that I'm going to read for you. How long? How long has he been laying there dead? Since the attack, it's been nearly a year, and the rot has only gotten worse. Through winter, through spring, and autumn. But now it's time. Time for the dead to rise once more. Time to again feel the searing pain his attackers inflicted. Though his first act is to find what they stole from him, then toss it into the bloody piles with the other. They skinned his face, took it while he was still alive, but now it's back. Now he can begin his quest. His enemies came to attack him. They didn't care what he was traveling with, care that he was traveling with half a dozen others. Their human bodies suffered far worse, and in the time that passed and the wolves didn't protect the remains from being picked over. They only circled around their master, making sure nothing that breathed came near him. These feral animals knew he would awake again. Their constant vigil conveyed that. Though he had been pierced, slit, hanged, shot, and skinned, they knew, like their master, they knew, like their master, that a day of reckoning would soon be coming, and that their journey together would just be getting started. And Gunslinger walks off through the woods, followed by his pack of wolves, ending the Spawn's Universe event. I hope you all enjoyed the video this week. Remember to join us next week where we cover Savage Avengers number 20 through 23. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Feedback is always welcome. You can also find us on the Jabroni Nerd Network Facebook page or on Twitter @Jabroni Network. Until next week, guys, keep talking nerdy.